Morning folks, how are you? What a fantastic day, eh? Liquid sunshine. So we're still talking about fear and feel the fear and do it anyway. It was quite interesting this morning when I was watching the news. We're now talking about the virus as if it knows what it's doing. As if it's a sentient being. No. It just wanders about aimlessly and targets the first person it can latch onto. Quite interesting, yeah. How we can give it a sort of conscience. It's got no conscience, it just gets on with it. I mean, even I'm talking about it like it's something. It's just, it's not a thing, it's just random viruses, I suppose. Anyway, let's move on. So feel the fear and do it anyway. See if this resonates with you, because it's quite interesting. Morning, Alana. Janet's still waiting for the fear to go away. She's always planned to return to college once her children were in school. But now she notices it's been 4 years since her youngest child actually started first grade. New excuses have popped up. I want to be here when the children come home from school. We really don't have the money. My husband will feel neglected. Although it's true that certain logistics would have to be worked out. That's not the reason for the hesitation. In fact, her husband is willing to let her in any way and help her in any way he can. He's concerned about her restlessness and often encourages her to fulfill her dream of becoming a fashion designer. Morning, Sarah. So each time Janet thinks about calling the local college to set up an interview, something stops her. She keeps saying to herself, well, when I'm not so frightened, I'll make the call. When I feel a little better about myself, then I'll make the call. Most likely, Janet is going to wait a very, very long time. The problem is that her thinking is all mixed up. The logic she uses automatically programs her for failure. The logic that she uses automatically programs herself for failure. It'll never change if she keeps thinking in that cycle. And I think that's important. I mean, I remember, morning Patricia, morning Janet. I remember when I first started college, it was the most frightening, probably one of the most frightening experiences I've ever had. I had been working for 3 or 4 years, as soon as I came out of school, in college and going back to college, and the fear of failure was a big, big thing. It was so daunting and so overwhelming that I actually, and I remember this vividly, I actually came out of the assembly hall when we were at the induction and went away down to the smoking area and actually just more or less hid. Morning, Anne. Morning, Francis. Now, for a lot of you, you think, wow, you did that? Yeah, I did. And I remember the first person I spoke to, it was the person that we actually were best buddies all the way through college for the next 3 years. And it was Scott Melvin. Scott runs a local computer company now, doing networks and all the rest of it. But Scott was absolutely fantastic, and we teamed up together, and we had a bit of camaraderie all the way through. I suspect Scott felt exactly the same way, and it was fear for him as well about having to go back to college. I do remember as well at college, the lecturer actually saying when we were at the induction class that 50% of you won't be here by Christmas. Wow, that was some statistic. And I looked around and I thought, do you tell me half of this class isn't going to be here by Christmas? And lo and behold, he was absolutely right. They weren't, because fear drove them away, or their circumstances drove them away. Anyway, that's another story. So, let's say, and let's go on from there. And then also, Susan Jeffers talks about this as well, about her going through her divorce. And she says, as my confidence grew, I kept waiting for fear to go away. Yet each time I ventured out into new territory, I felt frightened and unsure of myself. Well, I told myself, just keep putting yourself out there. Eventually the fear will go away. It never did. One day the light bulb went off in my head, and suddenly I realised the following truths. And the first truth is, the fear will never go away as long as you continue to grow. Let's look at it this way. If you're doing something for the first time, you're always going to be fearful. It's your natural defence. It's the way your mind works. It's there to protect you. So it goes straight away and says, wait a minute, you've never done this before. Stop right now in your tracks. That's exactly what your brain does to you and your thinking, because it wants to protect you. You have to realise that, and you have to overcome that, because when you look at the situation that you're in and you look at the circumstances that you're in, you often find there's nothing to be fearful for. So what's the second truth? Well, the only way to get rid of the fear of doing something is to go out and actually do it. Yeah, do it. That's it. Classic example, and I'll give you, and I use this analogy quite a lot, is when you're going to jump in the water in a pool. What's the first thing you do? You run up and dip your toe in and go, oh yeah, boy, that's cold. I'm not going in there. Why do you know, just for a change, just run and jump in? I often envy these people. Like, you're dipping your toe in like a big Jesse. and they come along and go, yeehaw, and just jump and do a dive bomber into the pool. You're like, grrr. Well, that's effectively what you need to do. Just jump in, because it's the fear that holds you back. And you often see that when fear, we're just doing it. You run into the water, it's freezing cold, you run back out in a flash, and you think, oh, I'm not going in there because it's freezing cold. But just jump in and swim around, because guess what? If you don't do that, you're just going to have to do it all over again. So feel the fear and do it now, and just get on with it. And this will lead me on to the third truth. The only way to feel better about myself is to go out and guess what? Do it. It's true. How many times do, when you think about it, and you put it off and put it off and put it off, and you procrastinate, and I better no do this, and I better no phone them now because they'll be at their tea. I better no phone them now because they'll be at EastEnders. They'll be watching EastEnders. They might not answer the phone. They might be upset. I better no phone them now. They might be at their work. I better no contact them now. They might be doing this and they might be doing that. And you automatically put yourself off every single time. And then at the end of the day, when it comes along, you more or less mentally beat yourself up because you've never done it. Does anybody relate to that? Because I certainly do. So the key is, what they say is, go out and do it first thing. Do it first thing, get it off your plate, so it doesn't distract you for the rest of the day. And the next one. Not only am I going to experience fear whenever I'm in unfamiliar territory, but so is everyone else. This is not unique to you, or myself, or I. You or I, it's not unique at all. Everybody feels that fear every single time. It's a human inbuilt trait. We are programmed like this. This is flight or fight response. And I've talked about this before. This is when you're sitting. This goes back to caveman. Let's talk about this again. So I'm in a forest. Look at this. This is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Does everybody hear the birds in the background? Look, squirrels. Wee squirrel. Anyway, I'm in a forest. Caveman days. So, two guys in the bush, checking out a bison. It's out on the plain. They're waiting to get it. They're waiting to hunt it. They're waiting to kill it for their tea. So they're waiting, having a wee discussion with each other. Will I go now? Will I go then? Will I go when? Will they see me? What's the best way to do it? And then all of a sudden, they hear cracking and twigs and branches behind them, and the noises of them breaking. Then out of nowhere, a T-Rex comes down and bites and grabs one and eats it all up, and the other guy goes, oh my God, and runs away. Flight or fight response. So what do you think happens to him the next time he hears that same similar noise when he's sitting hunting? It's exactly the same process. He immediately thinks, because of that, what happened the last time, that's going to happen again. So he's programmed for it. So he's now programmed and conditioned himself to fear that particular noise in that particular set of circumstances, and automatically assumes that a T-Rex is going to come down and gobble him up. Hope you understand that principle. Because it took me a while. But that's the flight or fight response. The key to that is sometimes just to ignore that or look at the facts first and then move on from there. So, truth number 5. Pushing through fear is less frightening than living with the underlying fear that comes from feeling of helplessness. Pushing through fear is less frightening than the fear of underlying that comes from helplessness. I've talked about this before. The nearly man, what drove me to do what I do. I saw Dave McEwen standing on stage as the nearly man, and he talked about it. Morning, Stephen. I nearly did this, and I nearly did that, and I could have done this, and I could have done that. We all know these people from day to day. The people that could have been brilliant footballers, but the partying and the drink got the better of them. The people that could have been brilliant singers, but it got the better of them. The people that could have been brilliant at university, but it got the better of them. And they look back and they think to themselves, and I bet you they will look back, some of them, and think, if only I had done it this way or that way. I never wanted to be the nearly man. And that's what resonated with me. I nearly could have done this, I nearly could have done that. And that's the most important thing I learned. So pushing through the fear is less frightening than living with the underlying fear that comes from the feeling of helplessness, but also from the feeling that what you could have been. But that doesn't stop you from doing it now. I've heard people say, but I'm 50 odd year old, I'm ready to retire. Wait a minute. If Colonel Sanders at 65 years old could have founded KFC at 65 years old and built the KFC empire, what does that say about me at 53 years old? I've got a 12-year head start on him. Wow, that's unbelievable. And I'll see you tomorrow at 7:30.